In this video, you will learn how to calculate simple interest. Interest is a topic that you will encounter later in life when you are investing money in a bank or going to make a big purchase like a car or a house or take out loans for college. Interest is a percentage either paid or gained on an amount that you either borrow or invest per year. So, for example, if you want to buy a car that costs $30,000 and you don't have $30,000 to buy the car in cash, you would have to borrow that money from the bank. And the bank will say, sure, you can have this money, but there is a catch. And the catch is that as you pay it back to us, you're going to owe us a certain percentage more on top of that $30,000. On the other hand, if you have, let's say, $10,000 that you've saved up over time and you want to put it in a savings account or something in the bank, after leaving it in the bank for so much time, every year they will add a little small percentage onto that $10,000 that you originally put in the bank. In this video, we will be looking at an example of buying a car and how the interest is added to the price of the car. So after you do some research, you decide you're going to buy a Nissan Rogue. There are 2 local car dealers from which you could buy. Each dealership has a different price for the car and each charges a different interest rate. Interest, as I said, is a percentage of the amount of money that you borrow for the car. At Anton's Automobiles, the price of the car is $25,000 with an interest rate of 3.75%. That means you will pay the $25,000 for the car and then you will pay an additional 3.75% per year on top of that. At Nicholas's Nissans, the car is $28,000 with an interest rate of 2.125% per year. It's hard to tell just by looking at this information which one would end up being the better deal because obviously the price of Anton's Automobiles is lower, but the higher interest rate makes it a little bit difficult to tell without actually doing some calculations. So the first thing we need to do is we need to calculate the amount of interest, and that we do that by calculating or finding the percentage of the principal. The principal is the original amount of money that we borrow. So the first thing we need to do here is determine the amount of interest that is owed per year at each Anton's Automobiles and Nicholas's Nissans. If you like to do the triangle method of finding percents, you would simply, for Anton, find 0.0375, which is 3.75% of $25,000, and that gives us $937.50. However, if you prefer the proportion method, that would be X over 25,000 equals 3.75 over 100. Both of these will give you that $937.50. At Nicholas's Nissans, we're going to find 2.125% of 28,000, and remember, we take the decimal and shift it over 2 spaces. So it's 0.02125 times 28,000, and that's $595. And if you're going to use the proportion, it's going to be X over 28,000 equals 2.125 over 100. And when you solve that, you should get 595. Now, what's most important is we need to understand that this is the amount of interest per 1 year. And oftentimes when we buy a car, it's going to take us 5 years to pay that amount back. We're not just going to pay it all back in 1 year. Most people can't afford to do that. So what that means is we need to, if it's $937.50 for only 1 year and it's taking us 5 years to pay it back, we need to figure out how much total interest we will owe the bank after those 5 years. And we will do that by multiplying these two answers by 5, since these are each for 1 year. So 937.50 times 5 is $44,687.50. And then at Nicholas's Nissans, that's $595 times 5, which is $2,975. This is the additional amount of money that you owe the bank back in addition to the original price of the car. So remember, for Anton, that was $25,000, and for Nicholas, that was $28,000. So obviously we knew the percentage for Anton was higher, so it's not surprising that this amount for 5 years is higher. But we still can't quite tell which one is the better deal because we only know which one has more interest, but we already knew that. So what we need to do now is we need to take the amount of interest that they're charging us for borrowing the money, and we have to add that back on to the original amount of money so that we can find a total. When all is said and done after 5 years, how much will I have paid for this car? So what we're going to do is we're going to add the original price plus that amount of interest for 5 years for each. And when we do that, we can see that there's a little bit lower price at Anton's Automobiles, even though that interest is much more. With that lower price point, it still ends up being a little bit lower than at Nicholas's Nissans. Before we do this last part, just a quick recap of what we just mentioned. When we first step is we're going to calculate the percent. And then the second step is that we need to multiply that by the number of years of the loan or the number of years that we are putting money into the bank. Sometimes that's all the question asks is how much interest. And if it just says how much interest, you can stop after step 2 because 1 and 2 will find how much interest after so many years. If it asks for the total after the amount of interest, then you could do step 3, which is to add it back on to the original amount. Now this last step is just a little extra step that we don't usually need to do to find interest, but I like to include this just to give you more of a realistic idea of how much would this actually cost an average person. So if you're going to pay, when you pay a car payment, you pay it every month, just like a phone bill or a water bill or an electric bill. I don't know how much you or your parents share this information with you about their expenses every month, but chances are they might have a car payment if they have bought a car in the last 5 years. So since we pay it every month, there are 12 months in a year times 5 years. That's 60 payments, 60 months. And so if we want to know how much would this cost us per month, then we would need to take that total from step C and divide those by 60 so you could see the monthly price. So you can see when you split it up 60 times, the difference is only about $20, but we already saw the difference in the total at Nicholas's Nissans is over $1,000 difference. So again, first you need to understand that interest is a percent of your original amount of money, either that you invested in a savings account or that you borrowed to buy something. So the first thing we need to do is find the percent, whatever percent they tell us it is, of the original amount of money. And then we also need to remember that that percent of interest is only per 1 year. So if it says it's going to take us 10 years to pay it back or 3 years, then we need to multiply the answer from step 1 by the number of years. And then again, every once in a while we'll ask for the total amount. And if there is that question, then our step 3 would be to add that interest back onto the original. So let's take a minute or two to try a couple examples and see if we quite have a slight understanding of simple interest. Pause the video so that you can practice. Diego deposited $10,000 into a savings account at an interest rate of 0.5% per year. How much did Diego earn in interest in 10 years? So the first thing we would need to do is find what 0.5% of 10,000 is. So if you're going to do the triangle method, you move this 2 spaces over. So it's 0.005 times 10,000. And if you're going to do the proportion method, that's x over 10,000 equals 0.05. I apologize for the writing in this video. I don't have my little tablet. I'm writing using the mouse pad and it's a little bit difficult. So hopefully you can read this. Either way, when you solve it, you will get 50. So that's $50, but remember that's per 1 year. So then we need to take that, since this is 10 years, and multiply it by 10. 50 times 10 gives us a total amount of interest of 500. Now this one just says the amount of interest, so we can stop there after 50 times 10 is 500. In our second example, Mr. Utz purchased a new Ford Bronco for $52,510 at 7% interest. What's the total he owes for the car if it takes him 6 years to pay off the loan? So we're going to take our percent, which is 7, that's 0.07, so 2 spaces over, times 52,510. Or if you like the proportion better, that would be x over 52,510 equals 7 over 100. Again, when we calculate this, that's going to give us the amount of interest for 1 year. And in this case, that's $3,675.70. So I had to double check that because at first I thought that looked a little bit high, but now that's per year, and then we're going to multiply that by 6, and that's going to give us sorry about that. $22,054.20. And then this one asks for the total. So we're actually going to add that back on to this. And then that gives us a total of $74,567.20, which is quite a bit for that car. That's a high interest rate, and that's a higher starting point, and it takes us 6 years to pay that one off. So that's almost over $22,000 in addition to the actual price of the car. Here's a couple challenges to give you a try if you'd like. Pause if you would like some time to solve this one. This one is going to be 4.75%. You need to know that this 950 is after 5 years. So the first thing you would have to do here is actually divide 950 by 5 to figure out the amount of interest in 1 year. So when you do that, you get $190 in 1 year. And then we want to know what percent is that out of the original, which was 4,000. So you would do what percent is 190 out of 4,000, and you can divide those times 100, you get 4.75. You could also set up your proportion and say that equals x over 100. In our final challenge, Richard deposits $5,000 that he earned from his summer job into a savings account. How many years will it take for the account to have a total of $6,000 at a rate of 0.8%? So if it started at $5,000, it's now at $6,000. That means the interest is $1,000. Now we're trying to figure out how many years does it take to get to a total of $1,000 of interest. So first we need to figure out what is the amount of interest per year. So that's 0.008. Remember moving that decimal 2 spaces times 5,000. Or you could do your x over 5,000 equals 0.8 over 100. And this will tell us how much interest per 1 year, and that would be $40 per year. And then our question is how many years at $40 per year would it take us to get to 1,000? So we would do 1,000 divided by 40 per year, and that would give us an answer of 25 years.